Guys, we're doing our Paraguay versus USMNT preview, which means that the World Cup is finally here. All the wait, 8 years of anticipation, all over. The game is starting on Friday, and I couldn't be more excited. This is probably the happiest I've ever been to preview a game for the USMNT, or at least in a very long time, and it means a lot. So we're going to talk about who we think is going to win this game. I brought on my friend Roberto Rojas to talk about Paraguay, all the things that we need to watch out for them in this match, and see what the USMNT needs to do and what their test is going to be in their first matchup in the group stage for the 2026 World Cup. All right, I've got my friend Roberto Rojas on today to talk about the USMNT versus Paraguay game, which will kick off the first match in the group stage for the World Cup. And I'm so happy we're finally here. We're doing this 2 days before the World Cup starts, but it's just hard to believe that it's already here, Roberto. How are you feeling about the World Cup, and has your excitement started to peak?
Well, not 2 days. It starts tomorrow, actually.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, it does start tomorrow.
We got two games starting off: Mexico, South Africa, and you got Czechia and South Korea. So we got two games, or technically three, before the U.S. Paraguay game. But yeah, no, I'm excited. Obviously, it's been 4 years since we were able to celebrate a World Cup, and in my case, for Paraguay, as a Paraguay fan, it's been 16. So it's been a long time coming, and I mean, what a way to kick off the World Cup, the return of the World Cup for Paraguay. That I think there's going to be a lot of identity crisis, to say the least, heading into the game on Friday. But yeah, looking forward to discussing this big game going on.
Okay, so that brings up my first question. How are Paraguay fans feeling heading into this World Cup? You just mentioned this is the first one that they've been in since 2010. Are they feeling pretty optimistic? Are they just happy to be here, or are they feeling like, oh, I'm a little worried?
Yeah, it's a lot of factors, I think. Certainly it's a generation of fans that have never seen Paraguay at the World Cup. 16 years is a long time when you think about how Paraguay from 1998 to 2010 went to four straight. So to miss three straight, from going to four straight to missing three straight is a lot. So, you really get accustomed to going to World Cups. And I think in that sense, when we see Paraguay back at the World Cup, I think it's going to be a lot of emotions, I think, of course, seeing them. And then also I think it's being able to sort of reevaluate where you are on the world stage, because, certainly for making the World Cup is a big deal. I think it's a big deal for anyone. But at the same time, you also have to look at the history of what you were able to do in past World Cups. I mean, we look at Norway, for example. Norway haven't been in the World Cup since 98, and they're all of a sudden a dark horse, just because they have two great superstars like Erling Haaland and Martin Odegaard, among others. There are a lot of teams out there that could indeed try to be, kind of the dark horses and spoiling it. I don't know if that's going to be the case for Paraguay, given the fact that, yes, they did come out of what is a grueling set qualification process. Let's not forget, even though they did extended two more spots, it's still grueling for anyone that, tries to qualify out of it. And if you look at the final table, it's close. Obviously Argentina ran away with it, winning the qualifiers, but you got Colombia, Ecuador, Uruguay, and Paraguay, and Brazil. Imagine that. Brazil even were in that top 4 or 5 spots. It's all close. I think it's like 1 point or 2 points within each other. So clearly it has been competitive, even if it has been extended 2 more spots. But no, I think heading into this game, I think it's going to be a good evaluation of where we are on the world stage. I think certainly the familiarity of playing the United States, as we saw in November, literally weeks before the draw happened, I think it's going to paint a good picture. And then, obviously the games against Turkey and against Australia, I think it's certainly going to really showcase. But I think there are a lot of people that when people saw the draw and you realize, okay, it's not the worst one that could happen, you get 3 teams that are of the same sort of caliber, that there is not one like big powerhouse that if you had like a European from Spain or France or whatever. I think that gives Paraguayans some optimism, and then heading into, if they do qualify out of the group stage, it's anyone's game really, because that's the beauty of knockout stage football, and especially when it is the World Cup.
Yeah, I mean, I think Paraguay is a very scrappy team that I feel like you cannot take lightly, right? I think they're a very good team, and to your point about the qualifiers. I think they did finish 6th place, and I think there was like a 3-way tie. I think they all there's like 3 or 4 teams that had the same amount of points, but I think they were 6th place because of goal difference, because they'd only scored I think maybe it was 14 goals in those 18 matches, and they conceded like 10. So they weren't like blowing the doors off teams by scoring a bunch of goals, but they were doing very good defensively. So let me ask you this: what would be considered a successful World Cup for Paraguay?
Well, I think getting out of the group is the bare minimum. I think, like I said, I think certainly the fact that Paraguay had gotten a really tasty group when it comes to also the travel. You have to also realize while this World Cup has, your group of debts and, there's going to be the advantage of the teams that are of, better strength and depth, you also have to realize that the travel is going to be grueling. We've seen that. We even see that for sometimes with delays going on for games. Paraguay are really very fortunate that they have one of the shortest routes out of all the teams, that they only have to play the United States in Los Angeles and over there at Inglewood at SoFi Stadium. And then they go back to back with Australia and with Turkey and Australia in Santa Clara at the 49ers Stadium at Levi Stadium. So, and of course the kickoffs are not as grueling. I think they kick off, this one against the US will be at 6 p.m. local time, and then the other ones will be at 7 or 8 p.m. local time. So I think when you look at that and those factors, I think the bare minimum would be to get out of the group. I think given the fact that, like I said, it's been so long since Paraguay have been able to compete at the World Cup that, you don't know what kind of that expectation is. Certainly there is always that dream to win the World Cup. I think any country feels that way. But at the same time, I think there has to be that realism of how, they haven't been able to really go eye to eye with a lot of the European teams, which, a lot of countries in the world will do that. But that's kind of always been sort of their white whale is to, one, knock off a European team, a big European team, and of course to win a knockout stage game. Paraguay, even though they did make the quarterfinals for the first time in their history, 2010, that was off a penalty shootout. And so I think getting a famous win, the first ever famous Paraguay win in a knockout stage group would be great. I think certainly depending on how they finish, one would argue that finishing first or second kind of gives you a good advantage if you look at who could probably finish in third. And if you finish in second, it's the group with that you might face between Belgium, Iran, New Zealand, or Egypt. And one would argue that Paraguay would, if it comes forward case scenario, they'll take that group for their next opponents. So I think, I think as a success for sure getting out of the group. I think heading into the round of 16, and of course, if they can equal what they did 16 years ago in South Africa and finish off in the top 8, I mean, wow, that would be incredible, especially given that, like I said, it's a country that hasn't been in the World Cup in quite some time, that usually in those processes of the 4 straight World Cups, they were, grinding to get better, round of 16, and then they ended up making the quarterfinals. So I think anything short of group stage qualification would be a disaster. I think getting out of the group, depending on who they face, of course, I think it'd be acceptable, but I think round of 16 is where a majority of the people would feel content, especially given, like I said, it's been such a long time since they actually competed in the World Cup.
No, I definitely agree. I think that there's a good chance that they will gather group stage, especially because you don't have to necessarily finish top 2 to get out. Let me ask you about the players, right? Who would you say are 3 players that USMNT fans need to keep an eye on for this game or should worry about from a Paraguayan perspective?
Well, the first name I would have said was Julio Enciso. I think that was everyone's Paraguayan name that, we're keeping an eye out when the draw actually happened. But he got injured in the last friendly before they traveled to Los Angeles against Nicaragua after 20 minutes. It looks like it's a thigh injury. And so people assume the worst, that maybe he's going to get out of that he won't play the group stages. But, news have come out that he's been in better condition. He's been training. He's been, still separated with the main group. So one would think that heading into this game, literally 48 hours from now, that he won't play against the U.S., which I think is a bummer because I think U.S. fans would have loved to enjoy playing against him. But it's also a bummer for Paraguay because you're essentially losing their best player. I mean, if that's the case for the whole group stage, then that would be the player to watch out for, because if he plays against Turkey and Australia, that's where Paraguay will probably be at strongest. That being said, I think there's the other names that I would give you. I think obviously everyone knows Miguel Almirón. Certainly his impact at Atlanta United and, of course, what he did at Newcastle, should not be forgotten. And so I think he's someone that could definitely be one of those guys that can really, do some damage in that flank. And the other one I think I'd give you is Gustavo Gómez. I'll give you 2 more names. In fact, if you want to give me 3 names and I couldn't mention Julio, I'm going to give you 2 more names. The Gómez's. I'm going to go with Gustavo Gómez, the defender. I think he's been one of the best defenders in South America. Definitely a Palmeiras legend over there in Brazil. Very strong center back, the captain, of course, a good leader. I think he's someone that, USMT players will have to try to get past. Same with Omar Lerete, his kind of partner who plays at Sunderland. And the other guy that I'm going to give you is Diego Gómez. Diego Gómez is obviously, we know from what he did at Inter Miami, getting in that group with, Messi, Suarez, Busquets, Alba, and then he goes and makes that move to Brighton and, is shining there. He's coming off a season, his first full season, because he came last January, so he came half a season, but it was his first full season where he scored double digits. He's been really one of the best players in a Brighton side that just qualified for the Conference League. Certainly he's going to be a name that I think if he has a good, World Cup, he might be on the move because he's 23 years old. He's part of that Brighton model that likes to sell these type of players, usually young South American players. So those, I think, are the players that if I was a USMT fan, would want to watch out for. And yeah, I think, like I said, I expect a really gritty Paraguay team that's going to try to snatch something here, especially to make a good first impression of the World Cup.
By the way, I just want to point out, though, that I'm also a huge Diego Gómez fan. Like, I'm a big believer in his. I think he'll end up becoming the best player to ever come through MLS and make the move to Europe. Because, like you said, I mean, there's not a lot of competition, I would say. I mean, there's some good players, but like you just said, he's arguably been Brighton's best player this year. And I don't think that this is his final destination. I think he'll get another step up and probably end up moving to a bigger club, maybe even after this World Cup if he has a good showing. So I really like Diego Gómez. I'm going to keep an eye on him. His improvement from year 1 to year 2 at Inter Miami was incredible. And I think he still has a lot of room to grow to become a better player. Okay, so what would you say is Paraguay's biggest strength as a team right now?
Certainly defending. I think certainly that's always been kind of the ethos that Paraguay has had. It's certainly something that has allowed them to be one of the more, teams that obviously, other guys don't want to play against. I think there is a famous video from France and Spain players, the ones that won the World Cup in 98 and 2010, that when they talk about Paraguay, because they did play against Paraguay in those World Cup campaigns that they won, they always feel like, oh my God, what do I have to tell you about them? Certainly they've made things difficult for those teams in major competitions, obviously playing with more than what they have and, trying to be the underdog. And, I think that's something that, hey, if world champions are feeling, that sort of like, oh my God, these guys caused us a lot of problems and maybe we didn't win the World Cup if it wasn't for playing against them. That shows kind of the reputation that Paraguay has given on the world stage, that they're going to be a team that's going to be very defensive, very gritty, work on the counter, obviously focusing on, their main players on the flanks like Almirón, Gómez, and so on. So it's gonna be one of those games. It's gonna be one of those games where if the U.S. are going to try to get a win, they have to really surpass that Paraguayan wall, as I say, because that's something that has been sort of their, like I said, ethos. Very good in the air, good on set pieces, so much so that that's kind of like one of their like personality traits, I would say. Good on crosses, winning headers. Basically it's Arsenal this season is what I'm saying. It's basically what we've seen from Arsenal, but maybe a little lesser. Just because.
Do you think they're going to play? Do you think they'll play bunker ball? Because I was not previewing this game, but I was talking about the group, my friend Tactical Manager, and they did score 14 goals in 18 matches and only conceded 10. But do you think that they're going to play a bunker ball style, like you just mentioned, Arsenal, maybe an Atletico Madrid in this game to try to maybe get a draw or 1-0 win?
I think it wouldn't be surprising. I think given the fact that, the situations where, they need to get the points that they need, certainly, they don't have to play to win every game. Certainly they're not a team that I definitely can't see getting 9 points, but I think certainly in this position, it's the first game of the World Cup. So I think you want to make a good impression. And given the fact that the games get much harder as the tournament progresses, I think that they understand that, the pressure is on the United States and, being the host, the first game of the World Cup, that sort of thing. I think that can allow them to be a bit more free flowing in that they can try to make things difficult on both ends of the pitch, be it defense and in the attack. So I don't think it will be that way. I think certainly it depends on how they started off. Like you said, if they get a goal from a set piece in the 20th minute or something, then they would try to bunker down as best as they can because they know that they can really control that lead if they need it. So I think it varies depending on how they do in the beginning of the matches, if they can snatch an early goal or whatever, and then it makes it difficult for them for the opponent, in this case the U.S., to try to surpass them in that sense. So yeah, maybe that end. They are good when it comes from that counterattacking and when good from on the attack, and they're really good on set pieces, like I said. But I think, like I said, it varies on how they're going to start the game, and of course how they're going to try to be good on transition as well.
Is there anything that worries you about the USMNT? Like, is there anything that you're kind of concerned to see what Paraguay does, to counter them, or is there a certain player that worries you about how Paraguay is going to be able to manage that certain player? Anything that worries you?
Well, I was at the friendly against them in November, and I was really impressed by the physicality and the sort of athleticism that the United States had. I think they were really good to sort of go eye to eye with Paraguay, and that they were much better. I think certainly one of the things that I obviously worry about from Paraguay, from the United States, is of course that they have that individualism that they could work out well, and maybe sometimes as a team it doesn't work that well. It's kind of the opposite for Paraguay, that they could work well as a team, but they don't really have the individual brilliance that someone like Pulisic or, McKennie or Adams or whoever, Balogun, that sort of thing. So I think, like I said, those players that I mentioned, I think are the ones to definitely watch out for, is, where that kind of individual brilliance shines over the collective. Usually it's the opposite, like I said, with Paraguay, where the collective becomes more bigger than the individual. But I think, when it comes to those sort of things where, the space is open, they're misfocused or whatever, I think that's where the United States can really be dangerous, be it, with, the goalkeeper being shaky, maybe the fullbacks, that sort of thing. You have to get them out of an off night. And I think the US can definitely have the capability of doing that, just because, like I said, they have the individual brilliance to do that.
So when I saw the group stage drawing, and I've said this, I still feel this way to a certain degree. Like the group stage, like what you said about there's no big dog in the group, right? It's very, very even. It's like there's not a high ceiling in this group, but there's a very high floor. Any team can be any team in this group, is how I feel, truly, right?
It's almost as if it's a group of death. Who knows? People keep saying France, Senegal, Iraq, and the Norway group is the group of death. I think it's this one, just because everyone has a chance of finishing first, second, third, or fourth. Like that is the reality of it.
Anyone could. I agree 100% with you. But that leads me to my next question. Because I'm sure you probably at least either watched it or saw some highlights. After the U.S.'s two tune-up games against Germany and Senegal, does that have you feeling any different about them? Because they did look pretty good overall in those two friendlies.
Yeah, I think obviously the first goal that Germany scored from a set piece, I think gives me that sort of idea of like, well, this is what Paraguay do. This is sort of their bread and butter. So, you can catch one of the defenders off and beating Matt Freeze off his far post. I think Paraguay can definitely do that from a corner or from a free kick or whatever. So, like I said, I think the U.S. are very much a team that is very effective. You even saw that, like obviously the Anthony Robinson goal was brilliant, I think, and no goalkeeper in the world would save that. So you have to obviously watch out for him. And yeah, Pulisic is someone that, people need to obviously respect. I think, obviously he's coming off kind of an off year with Milan, or at least an off calendar year, but he's still a really brilliant player. And, when he's on the ball and he's on the attack, I think he's someone that can really make something out of nothing. So, no, I think it's my feelings feel the same. I certainly think it's still going to be one of those gritty games, especially the fact that even though the U.S. won game and lost a game, it was very close.
Hey, everyone, quick word from our sponsor, FanDuel. If you're into soccer like I am, you already know how exciting La Liga, the Premier League, and MLS matches can get. With FanDuel, you can make it even more fun by placing bets on your favorite teams and matches across all three leagues. Whether it's a Premier League showdown, a La Liga thriller, or an MLS game with your local club, FanDuel makes it easy and exciting to bet on what you watch. Just remember, you have to be 21 years or older to play. Please bet responsibly and only if you're of legal age and in a state where it's allowed. Download the FanDuel app or head over to FanDuel.com, sign up, and get in on the action. Thanks for supporting the channel through FanDuel.
So it was very close, bare minimum win and then bare minimum loss. So I think Paraguay, even though they were coming off a friendly against Nicaragua, they should win those games 9 times out of 10. But no, I think nothing really changes. I think, like I said, I still expect a really gritty matchup, and I think it's going to be something that it's going to be a test of wit, honestly. I think that individual talents will obviously have the advantage, but then it comes to a point where maybe sometimes that's not even enough. That's where, like I said, the collective has to work, and then someone has to break through. Someone has to do something.
So I always use this example. There's a dozen examples of a player doing this, but when I think of a player that has broken out and kind of made their name on the stage, I always think about 2014 James Rodriguez, right, with Colombia. That's when he really had his coming out to really showcase, and then obviously he had the move to Madrid. who, if there was one player in Paraguay that could benefit the most from this tournament to really have their coming out party and really put their name on the global stage, who would you say that would be?
I think it's Diego Gómez. I think Julio Enciso is that reality, so I don't want to put him in that position. I think he knows that he is the future, and he demonstrates that. But I think someone that can really be a star for them is Diego Gómez, because he's someone that can literally do it all. He could play as a 5, he can play as an 8, he can play as a winger. Sometimes he can even play as a defender or a striker. As crazy as that sounds, and I think for any club that is watching and tracking players at this World Cup from all the countries in the world, they are looking at players that can do it all. Having those that it feels like coaches are going to have a headache of, like, where are we going to put him? And I think center midfielders are such a position that is so in demand. You see the rumors going on from, England, Spain, France, Italy, so on. Central midfielders are in demand. They really are a position that is so valuable because, like I said, they can do it all. And I think someone like Diego, with his age, he's 23, he's playing at a club that obviously is good at developing those type of players, and he's at a country at the World Cup that can be competitive, and he is one of the main stars. So I think he is someone, like, if I had to choose someone to really be a breakout star for Paraguay at this World Cup, I think it's Diego. I mean, Julio, I think he's definitely a reality. I think he's someone that can obviously do something, but I think Diego has some people that feel like, oh, maybe we haven't seen enough and the jury is still out. But if you get him in the position to really shine because of the way that he plays, I think he could be someone that could really help this Paraguay team moving forward.
Okay, so this game is on Friday. It's at 9 p.m. for me, 6 p.m. local time, like you said. What's your prediction for this first match?
It's a tough one. It really is. I've been thinking about this match since the draw, actually, because it was basically my birthday gift. My birthday was the next day, and it's like, wow, what a great birthday gift. USA Paraguay to open the World Cup. I've been thinking about this match for a long time, looking at the U.S., how they play, looking at Paraguay, how they play. And obviously the absence of Julio Enciso is such a big one. I think, there are players that can obviously do a lot of things that Julio can do, but, not be a like for like. That being said, I think the U.S. don't want to, disappoint in their opening debut. I think they understand that, maybe that loss against Germany is a good opportunity for them to really bounce back and to be like, okay, now we need to be serious. We need to understand what this all works out. I would have said a draw if Julio was playing, but I think I'm going to go for the U.S. A 2-1 win, just like we saw in Philadelphia. Like, I don't see either team blowing themselves out of the water, winning gratefully. I think, like I said, it's going to be one of those games where it could be a last-minute winner. It could be like something going on, or maybe they take 2 goals and Paraguay are trying to chase the game and they're trying to get the draw, but they can't. But I see the United States winning 2-1 over there in Inglewood.
That's exactly my prediction, too. I was going to say maybe a 1-1 draw, but I think 2-1 U.S. sneaks it out, like you said, because obviously they're missing a key player. I think it'd be a completely different story. And I think it's going to be a tough game. Like you said, I don't think it's going to be like the U.S. in complete control of the entire game, because there's going to be all these nerves, and Paraguay is just so defensively sound. They're not going to give up.
They'll also have the nerves as well. You have to realize it is their first World Cup too. So
yeah, well, and I think that's why maybe no one's going to blow anyone out, because it's just going to be a lot of nerves on the pitch and probably a lot of mistakes in that first game to try to get it out. Okay, I'm going to give my group, and I want you to give me your group, like how you think it's going to, I guess, pan out for our group. All right. So this is tough. This is really, really tough. I think that Turkey is going to finish at the top. Okay. And I would say they're probably going to have like 7 points. That's what I'm thinking, like around 7 points. Mm-hmm. I think that the U.S. are going to finish second. I think that they're going to beat Paraguay. They're going to draw with Australia, and they're going to draw with, they'll either draw or lose with Turkey, right? I don't think they're going to beat Turkey. So that's my prediction with them. And I think Paraguay finishes third. I think Paraguay is going to lose to the U.S. I think they're going to beat Australia, and I think they're probably going to give Turkey a very good game, but I think they'll probably lose that match. And I think Australia is just going to lose all their matches. I think Australia, because someone's probably going to have to, someone's got to finish last. And unfortunately for Australia, as good and chippy as they are, I just don't think they're as talented as these other 3 teams.
So, that being said, do you think Paraguay finish as the best third and qualify, or?
I think there's a very good chance. Yes, I do think there's a very good chance that they do make it out of the group and finish as one of the better third place teams.
So I'd say USA wins this one 2-1. I think Turkey beats Australia, so that's the first two games. I think Turkey tie Paraguay in that one. I think that's where Paraguay get that wake-up call, like, okay, we need to get something from there. I think you guys beat Australia, not by much, 1-0. And I think in the last game, Paraguay win 2-1, and the U.S. tie Turkey 1-1. So that being said, I think the U.S. win the group with 7 points, Turkey in second with 5, and then Paraguay with 4th, which would be probably enough to qualify to the next round. So it really is open, and unfortunately, Australia would. I agree. I don't think they win a single game at the World Cup. So it's going to be tough. Like I said, it could go either way. Like I said, I don't think there is an argument that you could make. I think there is an argument you can make of all the 4 teams either finishing first, second, third, or fourth. But it really is going to go down to those fine margins, especially in this first game for Paraguay and obviously in the other games. I think it really is going to be a case of like having to step it up because goal difference counts as well. Like you said, if you are going to qualify, and of course a lot of these teams are probably going to get similar points like draws and whatnot, it's going to go down to goal difference and head to head, of course, but it's going to go down to those factors, those little tiny factors that can decide who qualify and who doesn't.
I agree. And, I do think, I make this prediction, watch me be completely wrong. I will say one more thing before we wrap this up, that if the U.S. do lose to Paraguay, that is very bad for them because then they have to win that Australia game, which I think they will, but they have to. There's no losing that or drawing that. And then they're probably going to have to get a result against Turkey. I think 2 losses makes it very difficult to get out of the group.
Yeah, I agree. Like I said, you probably need just 1 win to qualify. So I think, whoever gets that 1 win will feel confident. And of course, a draw, with 4 points, that's more than enough to qualify. And I think I saw like a stat that said like it's a 99% chance to qualify even with the minus goal difference. So yeah, you're going to have to at least win 1 game and draw 1 in your first 2 games to really secure yourself qualification.
100%. Roberto, before I let you go, can you tell the people where they can find you at and follow your work?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. You can follow me at Roberto Rojas 97. I'll be obviously tweeting about the World Cup as I always do. It's the same on Blue Sky. I'll be talking over there. And you could also check out my 2 podcasts, Low Limit Football, that I do with my co-host Joe Usello to talk about everything going on in the world of soccer. And of course, if you want your Paraguayan soccer fix, check out Guarani Vision, the first ever podcast dedicated to Paraguayan football in English. We'll be talking big on the World Cup. We already have like a couple previews. And analysis of the players, the rivals. We analyzed all 3 rivals, and of course we analyzed these games as a whole. So definitely check that out on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and anywhere else that you listen to these shows. And like I said, thank you so much for having me, man. Appreciate it.
Roberto, it's been a pleasure, my friend. And World Cup is finally here. The excitement and nerves finally kick in, and we will see what happens. Guys, if you enjoyed this, make sure you give it a like down below. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit that little bell notification so you never miss any of our videos. Until next time, guys, I will see you all soon.